which is interesting because if y'all don't know it, yesterday got interesting. Yesterday got super interesting as Iran, for the first time ever, attacked Israel directly. And there's a lot to dig in there too, but you say, like, why would that geopolitical event matter? Well, it's because everything matters in this season. We're in a weird time and place where you can't have a separate spiritual/religious life from, you can't detach it from the things that are happening in the world. I don't know where we got that perception, but it was really never that way. Like, you couldn't ever really detach Judaism from their conditions in Babylon, from their conditions in Rome, from their conditions in David. And even Jesus used this political and geopolitical situation around him as a metaphor for his own kingdom. So when he talked about what he was going to accomplish, he talked about the destruction of the temple. And he said, this temple will be rebuilt in 3 days. He was referring to himself. And then what did the Romans do? They destroyed the temple in 70 AD. So Jesus was pointing to events around him to indicate what God was doing in heavenly spheres. I say all that to say that we have entered a fascinating season in the world. And the temptation is to say that everything is ending. That's the temptation. It looks like the end of the world. I don't think we're quite at the final act, but I think that we're in the beginning scenes. I really believe that. So I think that we're in the beginning scenes of the final act. And I don't talk about eschatology and stuff just because it's an area that nobody really knows about. We assume a lot of things, but we mostly do not know about it. But I think the reason that I'm going to talk about some of these issues and what I want to do is, like I prayed with Mom, we're unique pastors, and this is a unique church. And there is the responsibility to shepherd sheep, but we have the responsibility of raising soldiers. I really believe that. And we have the responsibility of helping people to understand things prophetically. It's not a normal church where we just talk about 3 points to your relationships or how to have a better life in the light of Christ, which is all that stuff's important. But there's a density here with the stuff that we carry that, Pastor Paula directly affects these events. Like, she's directly in their mix. And God just chose these assignments for us. And so we carry that with us. So the temptation to just reduce things to a simple message or just to say these are 3 points to life, I don't think that's what y'all are for. I think y'all are here to transform the world around you. I think you're here as soldiers. I think you're here on a mission. And the important thing about this season, when I say, Steve, that it's not the end, but it's the beginning of the end, is I do think that we have entered the age of martyrdom. I believe that. I think that we have entered the age of martyrdom, and that there will be a great end-time revival, but it's fueled by the blood of Christians. That's always how it's been. Revival has always been fueled by the blood of Christians. Now, I don't think I'm going to be killed for the gospel in my lifetime, though I'm willing to. However, I think by the time my grandchildren are here, their children or them, it might be a high probability. It might be a high probability. That's 2 generations. And so how do you prepare for such a radical shift in the wealthiest, most comfortable, once upon a time, most free nation in the world? How do you prepare that? Well, you have to get ready now. Because if you're not ready now, you will fail then. If you don't know who you are and the pressure you can withstand in the world now, you will fail when the time comes. Jesus had to warn Peter that he was going to die. Peter already denied Jesus 3 times, and so Jesus was letting him know when he came back to him, you're going to die, Peter. If you love me, go serve my people, but you're going to die. And he had to let him know, because had Peter got to that place, who knows what he would have done. He might not have been ready. So Peter had to be ready when Jesus visited him after the resurrection for his imminent death. Now, you're going to have a wonderful life. You're going to be blessed, but I need you to think as though you're engaged in a war. I need you to navigate as though this is the final moments of a play that has been going on as long as the world existed. I don't know how long this play is, and I don't know how much time is left, but I know that we're in the early scenes of it. So you must be ready. You must be ready. And when it comes to both your life personally and international affairs, the devil has one primary objective for his goals, and that is to make God a liar. That's to make God a liar. why make God a liar and how make God a liar were the two fundamental cruxes of the message today. Why make God a liar? Because if you make God a liar, you make salvation a lie. If you make God a liar, you make salvation a lie. So if you find God to be a liar, then that which he offers you, the route to salvation, the things that he provides you, will be a lie. And if Satan is truly a harvester of souls, which I believe he is, listen, my mother and I were talking about it the other day, and she said, sometimes I just wish, I'll put it nicely, she said, I just wish the old ways, the Old Testament ways. I said, what do you mean, Mom? She said, life is exhausting, and I wish there was rest. She said, it wouldn't be bad just to have a good life and just rest. And that's what the Old Testament people believed. They didn't believe in an afterlife until the Second Temple. So they believed that if you serve God, you would have a good life and then you would die. The resurrection belief is a later development in Judaism. And so it's interesting. I said, oh, Mama, you're tapping the ancient roots of our faith. Back in the day when David said, how can I worship you from Sheol, right? This is an ancient feeling. But it's funny, I told her, I said, Mom, I understand that feeling. Everybody thinks that we are Christians to escape life. And that's not the case, because the burden of Christianity is actually far, far more difficult in many ways than not being religious at all. You've heard a lot of atheists say, well, you just have to believe that there's a God in the sky to help you. You just have to believe and that there's an afterlife. And there's elements of that are great, but there's also a horrifying side of that if you're a Christian. The horrifying side of that is there's a hell. I have done everything within my theological power to eliminate hell. I have tried, I've searched Scripture. I don't believe it's the way that we describe it, but I have searched Scripture, I've tried, I've read inclusionist books and universalist books. I've done everything I can to try to erase the reality of hell from our faith. And let me tell you something, you can't. You can't erase the reality of hell. Now, I do not believe that it's God sorting people and sending there. Let me tell you what I believe, and this is what makes the burden of our faith so dominant. I believe that there is evil, and I believe that evil has a home. I believe that there is evil, not just bad actions, not just things we choose, but a personification of rebellion against God, a thing that we call evil, right? And this evil has a home. And it's territorial. And whatever this evil wants, it wants to take to its home. So when we talk about the harvesting of souls, this is what I'm talking about the war is about. It's not just about you not having a good life prophetically. It's not just about the change of geopolitical things. It's to make God a liar so that if you believe God is a liar, you'll believe salvation is a lie. If you believe salvation is a lie, you can be harvested by evil. You can be dragged to the pit of hell, and your generations can be decimated. So we have to make sure that God is not a liar so we don't believe the lie. How many of you have believed a lie in your life? We all believe lies at various points. And it's an interesting thing because how is God made true in your life? He's made true by the word of his testimony, by your experiences with him and others' experiences with him in life. So what I mean by that is this. There's this something, we're going to get a little heady today, but there's this something called the God of the gaps theory. And it's used to try to explain a fallacy, how Christians think, that we think wrongly. Because people say, well, you're in nature and you try to explain nature by something you don't understand, so you just say God. Or there's something in your life that you don't understand, so you just say, this is God. And this is called the God of the gaps theory. And people criticize it because there was a famous clip of a commentator one time, and he said, the tide goes in and the tide goes out. The sun goes up and the sun goes down. We don't understand that. It's God. And he was sitting next to a scientist who said, I can explain every single one of those things to you. And see, he looked foolish because what they were saying is, you might not have understood that 1,000 years ago, but we did understand that 500 years ago. And if that's the attribution for why you believe in God, that's a silly one. Because give anything enough time and we will eventually understand it. Now there's an interesting thing about that. Because when you talk to a lot of atheists and when you see them in debates and you hear them talk about the reasons they don't believe in God, they all have a moment where they say, what somebody would ask them, what would it take for you to believe in God? And they say, well, here's what it would take for me to believe in God. if he drew his name in the sky and he called me forth and he said and it's very specific things. What's interesting about that, Mom, is that's still the God of the gaps concept. I want you to think about this. Every single person who says this, Pastor Todd, they said, okay, I believe in God if the stars align to say my name and then say to me, believe in me and you shall set free. I'll believe in God then. It's still the same reasons that we believe in God now. Because the logic's still the same, meaning that you're just saying that if there was something you could not conceive of, that you experienced, if there was something beyond your understanding that was so prominent and so dominant, you would believe in God. So essentially what they're confessing when they say this, and every single prominent atheist I've heard has said this, what you're confessing when you say this is that the testimony you need to believe in God has not been had yet. That's the confession. The radical concept about this is that it reveals nothing about God and everything about us. In other words, anybody who either believes in God or does not believe in God has all the testimony they need to make the choice. They have all the testimony they need to make the choice. It could be just looking at the world around you, or it can be personal testimony. Me, I was very stubborn. I needed a lot of personal testimony. I needed to see miracles. I needed to see prophecy. I needed to be rooted in the supernatural, and that helped me believe in God. But Jesus said, blessed are those who believe without seeing. Why would he say that? If you have to see to believe, nobody would believe. But he says, blessed are those who believe without seeing. Because he understands the concept of faith is not what God does around us, but what you choose to do with what's around you. In other words, every single person in your life has enough evidence of the reality and the miracle working power of God to live a life full of faith now. But most of us are half-steppers. Most of us either believe in God halfway but make him a liar in other ways. Some of us don't believe in God at all. But we're at varying places. And it's interesting because you can make this about atheism, belief or non-belief, but it's also about how Christians interact with God and with the works of God. Because what ends up happening is that there's something in our life. I've noticed this with me. I said, well, I'm not an atheist. I believe in God. But there was areas of my life that I was limiting the promise of God. I was limiting the things of God. I had made God a liar in certain aspects of my life, even though I believed in God. And I was waiting for him to confirm things before I made the next step. And we do this a lot of times. We're always waiting for God to confirm the next thing or create the next thing that's evidence for us to take a step of faith. And God does not like that, because he says, I want you to live the life of faith first, and I'll confirm it with the evidence afterwards. And so I say all that to say that whether it's the world around us or whether it's you personally, all the evidence that you need, everything that you need to have a life full of faith and therefore full of obedience, radical obedience to God is there. And if you're waiting for God to confirm something, you're the one that's wrong, not him. You're the one that's out of line, not him. And I don't mean confirm a specific thing. Should I do this specific thing? God, I need help. I mean, if you're waiting to obey God with the fullness of your being, if you're waiting, let's just say, for example, you're waiting to jump into ministry if God's spoken it to you because you need him to do a little bit more, or if you're waiting to do something in your life, you're making God a liar yourself. You are making God a liar, because faith is not something that's given to you externally. It's something that you either operate in or not operate in. And so what the devil likes to do, I'm very tired today, forgive me guys, I know I'm trying to tighten it up, but what the devil tries to do is he tries to get you out of a place of an absence of faith to think that God is a liar. I'm going to get into Israel in a second. Okay, I know this is, can I have my water? Can somebody bring me water? You're like, well, he talked about Israel, now he's here. I'm trying to show you something. Thank you, Gina. I'm trying to show you that that God, that there's areas of your life whether it's on a global scale or it's in a personal scale, that the enemy's entire effort is to make God a liar. Yet God can never be a liar because everything that you need to believe him fully already exists. It exists within you, it exists around you, and there's nothing more that you need from God to commit yourself completely to him, even unto death. There's not a single thing. And so if you're waiting for God to confirm something, you're living the out of the gaps theory. You're just waiting for him to confirm something even though he's already told you. You're doing what atheists do. Does this make sense? You're doing what atheists do. You're doing the very thing that leads people to deny God's existence. Because I just need another piece of evidence. If God just did this thing in my life, I would obey him in this way. If he did just thing. So what is the devil always going to try to do, Derek and Shay? He's going to try to make God a liar to you. So that you can say, how can this God that promised me this thing not fulfill it? How can this God that swore this thing not fulfill it? How can this God? And sometimes it's not just what God swears or doesn't swear, it's what we perceive of his promises. It's how we interpret. And I can tell you there's things about my life that I thought God would do more on already. I thought he was going to take me further. I thought there was going to be more activity in certain areas of my life. I thought financially I wouldn't have to sweat anymore by the time I was 38. I thought that I was like, yeah, God's going to bless me because I saw these prophetic things. And guess what? I still struggle and I'm still hurting and there's still problems and there's still areas of my life that I'm like, hey God, where's the fruitfulness here? Where are you at? And there's a temptation at times for me to go, ooh, you must be the liar. You must be the liar. But that's always the enemy. Because when I believe that God has not fulfilled something, it will directly impact my obedience and my interaction. And the irony of that is it's when I choose the path of disobedience, when I choose the path of faithlessness, that's when God cannot manifest his promises. All right. That was a long-winded and kind of sloppy way of saying that the devil's primary goal is to destroy the promises of God in your life, to make him a liar to you. He wants you to think that God is a liar. He does this on a global scale. It's, going back to examples, how can there be a God if children die of cancer, right? How can there be a God if X, Y, Z? And we take a perception, a negative perception of what's around us versus a faith-filled perception of what's around us. And the problem is that there's always, we can always do that. We can do that infinitely. That never goes away. And so when you recognize areas of your life that there's faithlessness, you have to make the realization that it's you and you alone that can initiate faith. I don't mean that without the Holy Spirit. I mean in conjunction with the Holy Spirit, it's you and you alone that can choose to operate in a place of faithfulness or not. So when we get to things on an international scale, when you get to a nation like Israel and a people like the Jewish people, what does Satan want to do? He wants to make God a liar. He wants to make God a liar. Let me just backtrack for a second and explain something to you. What's interesting about the Christian Bible, why do I believe in Christianity? Okay, I believe in Christianity because of the testimony of Christ. I believe in Christianity because of the miracles I've experienced. I believe in Christianity for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons that I believe in Christianity most dominantly is because of history. Because of history. History speaks to the evidence of our God. If you were to go look at the kingdom of David and the what we know about it, it was about 11 acres where things were set up. And what we have now is scriptures talking about this kingdom that spoke as though it dominated the world, as though it was the religion, the one and only religion, and it was going to take over everything, and there wouldn't be an acre of land or a piece of land in the world where the Jewish God, the God of Israel, had not made himself known. What's funny is that archaeologists they break their back trying to find evidence of a massive scale kingdom. They don't have evidence of a massive scale kingdom. They have evidence of like a little podunk town with a few people, right? A podunk town. They have evidence of the Egyptians. They have evidence of the Babylonians. They have evidence of the Assyrians. They have evidence, extended evidence of all these kingdoms, and their gods are inscribed and all this. But what's funny is we have to figure out who their gods are. Yeah. Think about what I'm saying. We go to these kingdoms that have vast territories, and we have to figure out who their God. We have to put the pieces together. And these kingdoms reign for periods of times, and then they fall. And they reign, and then they fall. And in the center of them all were these little people that said their God was the true God who would take over the world. Now, I ask you this day, do you worship Apep? Do you worship the gods of Assyria? Do you worship the gods of Babylon? Do you worship the gods of Egypt? No, you worship the God of Israel, though you're thousands of miles away, though you're in a different nation and of a different ethnicity. All across the world, there's one God that's worshiped. Why is this one God worshiped? Because his word was made fulfilled through his people, and it spread like fire. And so when he told this little podunk, he was rich, this rich farmer, this rich sheep herder, Abraham, that he was going to run the whole world. In the time of Abraham, everybody thought, this is just a farmer. This is just a sheep herder. This guy's talking about how his God in the land of 1,000 gods is the true and living God, and how there won't be a place on earth that his seed does not step. That's going to be a lie, because look at all these kingdoms around you. They're going to attack you. They're going to destroy you. They're going to do all they can to eliminate you. And the thing is history verifies that the promise of God, our God, came about. Because I don't know the gods of the Assyrian ancestors. I don't know the Egyptian gods. I don't know the Babylonian gods. I don't know their names. And you'd be hard pressed to find a temple on earth where they're worshiped. You'd be hard pressed to find a temple. But the majority of the world, 2.3, 1.8, I think over half the world worships the God of Abraham. Over half the world worships the God of Abraham. Whether you're Christian, whether you're a Jew, whether you're a Muslim, you worship the God of Abraham. And so history is constantly verifying just through the unveiling. And I want you to think about that for a second. Because if you think about the historical context of the Jewish people and even the promises of Abraham, it's pretty remarkable what they held on to in their time. Again, if we look at the archaeological evidence, the kingdom of David, even when the kingdom was at its peak, was a negligible kingdom in terms of the surrounding areas. It just wasn't, and the Bible kind of were the best because it's speaking about itself prophetically. It's even speaking its own future into existence. The reality is that if you were looking at the archaeological evidence alone, there is no reason that the God of Israel should have become the God of the world. It simply should not have happened. But as they were living, they knew that would be the case despite the evidence around them. They knew that would be the case despite the fact that it had not manifested in the way that God said it would manifest. And so we can look backwards and see the importance of living in faith and being faithful even in the midst of before God filling promise, even while you're in the process of believing in that promise before God makes it into manifestation. We have to look at our forefathers and recognize that we, as they were, so we are. There are things in your life that you just have to hold on to. There are things in your life that you just have to believe despite the lack of evidence around you. And you have to trust in the word of God. And this is why Hebrews says that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So you're always operating in a place of hope about the God that you believe in. What the enemy wants to do then is he wants to do everything he can to cut that hope off. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. One of the most powerful statements in the world, hope deferred makes the heart sick. That's such a powerful statement because your heart actually turns sick. You actually get ill when you lose hope. When you lose hope, not when you lose evidence, but when you lose hope. So it's always about the hope. Again, one of the most ground-shaking things for Jews was the Holocaust. And many people who believed in the God of Israel lost all hope and stopped believing. And we can even see inscriptions in concentration camps that say, God, I blame God for this. Where is God? It existentially almost destroyed the Jewish faith because they were not living in the midst of a promise. They were living in the worst possible situation. They were living in the midst of the darkest hours since the Babylonian exile. They were living probably worse. 2/3 of their European population was destroyed, decimated. The world was very close to eliminating them. Very, very close to eliminating every single Ashkenazi Jew. And so, in the midst of that, it's very hard to say, God is great. It's very hard to keep a Sabbath. It's very hard to walk in obedience. It's very hard to pursue those things because what the enemy has robbed you of is hope. Hope. Now, what he wanted to do in that situation is he wanted to finalize the end of hope. He wanted to finalize the end of hope. The spirit that drives things like the Holocaust is a spirit that is it's Satan who wants to cut off hope. By cutting off a people who are promised by God, by cutting that off, by silencing them, by ending them, he wants the world to see that God is a liar. That God is a liar. That he won't save you, that there's no need to worship him, that he won't call to you, that they're a kingdom just like any other, and that if you serve him in your life, if you trust his son Jesus Christ, you're going to find yourself disappointed. You're going to find yourself failed. Why make God a liar? Because you make salvation a lie. How make God a liar? By cutting the knees off of his promise, by trying to stop his promise, by trying to stop it in its tracks, by trying to rob you of hope. Never be robbed of hope. Never be robbed of hope. No matter what you're going through, do not be robbed of hope. You might not have the evidence of the promise, but you have to hang on to the hope of the promise. I can assure you that there is a God. I preach to myself as much as anything else because I can tend to be pessimistic. I can tend to have a negative view, but I have to hold on to hope that God is doing everything he's going to say. And when I'm realistic about it, when I'm honest about it, God has already done what he said he was going to do in my life. He's already done. The problem isn't with God, it's with me. It's with me. And we all have to look at this for ourselves. We all have to look at this for ourselves because exactly what the devil wants to do with the Jewish people is what he wants to do with you. Like if you think that it's just, you as the church are an extension of the promise to Israel. Let me make something clear here. The Jews have a physical promise. A physical promise. Promise this. You have an eternal promise. You have a much greater promise, says Hebrews. One promise does not nullify the other promise. It deepens the other promise. Okay? It deepens the other promise. Why does this matter? Because we think so much in terms of this, that if you can cut this off, we'll cut the spiritual one off. We think so much in terms of, what did Demetrius show me with Kanye West? When he said, I stopped believing in Jesus, or he said, I struggled with Jesus because I was praying for him when my marriage was suffering. I was praying. He said he was going to restore everything, and he did not show up. He said he didn't show up. He said, I got a problem with Jesus. I am my own God. You know, we know Kanye wavers. He's everywhere. He's wishy-washy. But that was very telling, because what did the enemy attack? His hope. He made his hope sick. He drained his hope. So by not providing the evidence he sought, now think about this, the desires of his heart, by not providing that, he made God to be a liar in Kanye's eyes. He made him to be a liar. Now, I pray for him every day. I hope he does well. But this is just typical scenario for many Christians. I've seen these stories over and over. I see people say, the Christian member of our family was the only one that died of cancer. My Christian father went bankrupt. My Christian this, my Christian that. We suffer. And what it does is it cuts the knees off of hope so that what's really in you comes out. What's really in you comes out. And you take what's in you and project it on God. It takes a radical maintenance of the heart, so to speak, to be a good Christian. Because you always have to counter your desires with his desires. You always have to match your hope with his hope for you. You always have to make sure they're in line, because anywhere they aren't in line, the enemy will exploit the areas of your hopes that are not rooted in God. Right? This is why Jesus, just to make it personal, says you can't serve God and mammon. Right? You'll be like a house divided. You'll be a servant serving two masters. It's difficult because what the enemy will do is he's the God of this world. He can attack you in your finances. He can, there's one of two things terrible that happen to people. Either they get rich disconnected from God. That's the worst possible thing that can happen to somebody. The worst possible thing that can happen to somebody is a faithless person become wealthy. They become their own gods. It's a nightmare. The other thing that can happen is you can constantly attack somebody's resources. You can constantly put them under pressure to try to make God a liar, to try to make that area an area of hope deferred. Does that make sense? And so there's area of your life, and you have to constantly be matching and ready to shift at any moment your life to what God has for you next. This is why if there's areas where the enemy can attack you relentlessly, be very, very careful. If it's an area, my health, it's an area that the enemy, I just don't have some of the solutions that I need. It's an area that the enemy has relentlessly tacked me on, and he provokes me, and I want God to solve it, but my hope in God is not in that area. My hope in God. If I get fully better, I get fully better. If I don't, I don't. I don't care, because that's not where my hope is. It's not where my hope is. So it's a waste of time for the enemy to attack me in that area in terms of my spiritual strength, because I'm beyond it. I don't care. It doesn't make me doubt God at all. I'm not going to quit believing in God. I'm not going to quit serving God. The enemy can do whatever he wants. I'm going to keep going forward. But there are areas of my life that he can attack me, that would rattle me, that would rock me, because I have hope in their outcomes. I have hope in their situations. And if the enemy can attack those hopes, he can get me to question the God that gave me the blessing in the first place. That's why I'm always covering two things: the things I care about and my heart. God, make me be able to go through any situation with faith and hope in you. Okay. All right, where am I at? Testimony of Christ. I have a lot of different notes, but Rachel calls World War III, and I'm actually I'll wrap it up with the geopolitical situation. So we're in an interesting era where every time a new hope has emerged, or any time a new promise has emerged, scripturally, there's always an onslaught of attack. Herod kills all the firstborn, the same thing that Pharaoh does. Pharaoh kills all the firstborn because deliverance is promised. Herod kills all the firstborn, mass infanticide, because a king is promised. We constantly see these patterns, and I think I talked about it 2 weeks ago, that the highest peak of Roman persecution of the church happened in the 20-year period before Constantine turned the empire into Christianity. So before that could happen, Constantine's mother was a Christian, and then Constantine converted to Christianity. He was the emperor, and he made the Roman Empire Christian. But before that could happen, the two emperors that preceded him did everything they can to wipe out as many Christians as possible. So you see these patterns in history where something is about to come forth. Something from God is about to come forth, and so the enemy's only option is to turn on everything he can to destroy it. So the world looks like it's ending. It looks chaotic. There's a lot that's happening right now that is very scary, and if you're a Christian and you have eyes to see, you know it's the enemy working overtime. But there's two ways to look at that. One, you can look at that with fear, and I understand that because I have young children. Or you can look at that with hope. And I understand that because I understand God. I understand how he works, and I understand how he works through history. And so what we're seeing now, and because of the sake of time, I'm not going to go through it all, but we're seeing this clear effort by Satan to cut Christianity off at the knees. We're seeing this clear effort, and we're seeing it. When I talk about Christianity, I talk about the state of Israel too. I talk about the promise of the Jewish people. He's doing everything he can to cut it off now and to make God a liar now. And you see this intensifying pressure from all around. You see the cultural transformation in America. You see the cultural transformation around the globe. You see the development of radical Islam. And then to top that off, you see this sudden attack and new attack on Israel. And so it has to make you wonder, what is God bringing forth that all of these things would happen? And you have to be able to navigate those things. If it happens within, I'll reemphasize that to personalize it as a pastor, if it happens in the world, it also happens with you. The same thing is being mirrored with you. The enemy is going to attack you in much the same manner. And there are seasons that the more you're attacked, that really is that old cliche that the blessings on the other side of that is in some ways true. Because when the enemy lets loose relentlessly is when you know that God has something planned for you that they've somehow spotted. They've sensed something. They've picked something up in the atmosphere. And what I mean by that is when Jesus was being tempted in the wilderness, it wasn't just about his temptation, but it was also about the enemy fishing for information. Satan was also fishing for information, trying to gauge who this person was and what his capacity was. So when they're in the wilderness, it's not just about the temptation of Jesus and the attack on Jesus, it's also about Satan's strategy. Satan's strategy. He's not God, so he has to discern strategy. And so what we see is this interesting strategy of onslaught. We're seeing a strategy of onslaught. And it's fascinating because it means that geopolitically, there's probably going to be a significant shift and a permanent worldwide shift in the near future. There's probably going to be something that would begin to usher in the end time scenario. And so to give context, then we'll finish. It's funny because we're all aware of the attacks that happened on October 7th in Israel. We're aware of that. Hamas killed 1,200 Israelis. They killed 30 Americans. Not many people realize that. And it wasn't just Jews. It was Arab Israelis too. They slaughtered fellow Muslims. They killed 1,200 Israelis, 30 Americans, and they took hostages. We know that 6 of the hostages are still American. So, I mean, they're still American hostages. There's American hostages being held. And the reason I say that is because there's such an outcry against Israel that even Americans forget that our own people are being held by terrorists right now. And so it's interesting because, and I'm going to talk about this for just a second. It's interesting because you can always see in the framing embedded narratives that have nothing to do with the situation. So Hamas comes and kills terrorists, or kills Israelis. Terrorists come and kill the Israelis, take hostages, essentially initiate a war. And then what you're hearing now by the majority of the world is free Palestine. You're hearing a shift. Now, I'm sympathetic with the struggles. I am. But you're hearing a shift. And what's interesting is people have quickly forgotten the events that initiated this and that it's a war trying to finish this. And it's turned into a framing about something else. And there's in this framing all of this subtext, all of these other issues. And good people fall for it. Good people with hearts that are golden fall for it. Because they conflate the issues. And a lot of times this is based on religious and ethnic things. And this, actually, here's a good example if you're an American. OJ just died. Everybody knows OJ killed those people. We all know it. White people know it. Black people know it. Everybody knows it, right? We're not going to lie, right? We know it. But he got off. Because of the framing. And think about the conversations that are happening now. The conversations that are happening now about this are not about whether OJ did it. They're about relations between black people and white people. That's the conversation. So when you look at what happened in the OJ trial, I watched the video of the juror. A black lady that says, yeah, we know he did it. We know he did it. And the interviewer says, so did you let him off as a response to Rodney King? She said, yep. So here's why. Embedded in this narrative, they had beaten a man senselessly for no reason. Well, he was running from the police, but they beat him too much. Let me put it like that. They beat Rodney King senselessly. It was captured on film. It caused outrage, right? And then, in addition to that, the murderer OJ, when the year comes where OJ is arrested, even though the evidence is stacked against him, Mark Furman, who is a bigoted racist, plants evidence anyways. He removes the glove, he changes things, right? And so even though he was already guilty, what it did is it brought to the forefront all of these other issues and changed the framing of a homicide into a story about race on a national scale. You hear what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's unjust either side. But here's my problem. What I mean is that should have been a conversation about a man who killed two people. But it became a conversation about relationships between blacks and whites in America. That's what it became about. And so embedded into this situation was a narrative that had very little to do with that exact situation, but overtook it. And then it became a case of a miscarriage of justice because of other miscarriages of justice. Does this make sense? This is exactly what's happening in Israel. This is what's happening in Israel. What's happening in Israel is that there is a cry to do things that has nothing to do with the situation at hand. There's a reframing, and the problem with these reframing is in the intensity of it, is that it's on a global scale. It's the most powerful nations in the world. It's the most powerful people in the world, and it's the same spirit that was behind the Holocaust. It is. It's the same spirit. This spirit that's behind it. I'm not saying everybody that falls for it is that spirit, but the spirit that's driving it is a spirit that trades lies for the truth. And what it wants to do is destroy the promises of God. It wants to make him a liar on an international scale. It wants to make him a liar. And so instead of having the conversation about a retaliatory war against Hamas to eliminate them once and for all so that nothing like that happens again, I want to make this crystal clear as an American. When you hear people calling for a ceasefire, I want you to think about this. After 9/11, when the same amount of people were killed, it was 1,200 people, right? And 9/11, is that correct? Something like that. The same amount of people, interesting number, were killed. What did we do? We said we're going to hunt Al-Qaeda down and eliminate them off the face of the earth. That's what we said. And we did not stop until we did it. And had anybody said, no, ceasefire with Al-Qaeda, we would have said, that's not going to happen. What are you talking about? That's never going to happen. And it didn't happen because people knew. But when it comes to a situation like this, you see the reframing of things, because embedded into this is a narrative that has nothing to do with the situation, and also has nothing to do, you can say what you want. You can call it an apartheid state. You can say whatever you want about it, which is untrue. You can call it that. But if you try to take that as a logic to kill 1,200 civilians, rape them, take hostages, you can't stretch the logic to that point. Like that's never a just response to something that happened. And so what you see in this is a demonic effort to turn the world, and it's working. It's working against Israel. It's very much working. What's crazy is it's not just a left-wing thing. It's not just a right-wing thing. It's the whole world except for a sliver of people. Evangelicals. Well, let me make this clear. Israel only exists because America after the Holocaust was the authoritative vote. Israel, the British had pushed it, but America pushed it across the finish line and said, yes, we want Israel to exist. And Truman called himself the Cyrus. He called himself Cyrus, and he understood those Bible stories enough to know that the state of Israel had biblical ramifications. I say that to say that we have been not just Israel's greatest ally, but truly its only ally. Yeah. Its only ally. Now, you'll hear Benjamin Netanyahu say, we thank you for our allies in America, Britain, and France. Let me tell you something. When America's taken off that list, Britain and France are gone. You have, in England right now, the number one name is Muhammad. It's the number one name for a boy. You have this resurgence. Christianity has declined, but you have this uptick in conversions to Islam. And so I'm saying that if you think that England would remain an ally to Israel if America wasn't, you're mistaken. And here's what's interesting about why am I saying this? If you think that American politicians want to be an ally to Israel, you're severely mistaken. If you think that anybody under the age of 40 wants to be an ally to Israel, you're severely. My generation and Generation Z are probably the greatest anti-Jewish generation on records in years. And I don't say anti-Semitic because that's a word, Semitic. We're not talking about Canaanites and Middle Easterners, and we're not talking just about Mizrahi Jews. It's anti-Jewish. We need to stop saying anti-Semitic. Semitic is a catch-all term that is not what we're talking about. It's specifically anti-Jewish. And I've never seen such a high degree of anti-Jewish hate as I've seen it this now. I see it in right-wing places, I see it in left-wing places. And there's been this crazy convergence where people who do not agree about anything else in life, people who have no reconcilable political beliefs, have come into alliance over their hatred of the state of Israel. Think about that, not just this situation. Again, we're not talking about Israel's response to Hamas. That's not the hashtag you see 85 million people posting. You see Free Palestine. You see from the land to the sea, Palestine will be free. Meaning the state of Israel will not exist. We'll take it off the face of the earth. This is occupied territory. Now, I just want to put this, regardless of how you think that's handled, I just want you to think of something. Jews were not seeking a homeland. They weren't seeking a homeland. Zionism was not a prominent philosophy at the time. It just wasn't. In 1917, you have the Balfour Declaration, and you have a Zionist movement happening in the UK, but it wasn't prominent. Jews were scattered across the world. Mizrahi Jews, Sephardic Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, Ethiopian Jews. You have all these, the Beta House of Israel, you have all these different Jews scattered across the world. And what happens is in the midst of that scattering, the Holocaust happens, which eliminated 2/3 of the Jewish population. 2/3 of the Jewish population. Jews who have been hunted down and hated their entire existence. They've been despised. Let me tell you something. Black people have suffered, but compared to the hatred that's for Jews, let me tell you, if you look at like white supremacist websites, they'll make fun of black people, they'll talk bad about black people, but they despise Jews. They despise Jews. One of the most prominent philosophies in what's called the New Right. And by the way, conservatives, we have a race problem. We need to stop denying that we have a race problem. We have a race problem. We act like we don't have a race, that there isn't a group of conservatives that hate black people and hate Jewish people, when we all know that there is a group of conservatives that hate black people and hate Jewish people. And the problem with that is we cannot advance our ideas. We cannot sit there and talk about the greatness of America if we deny that reality. Because why would you ever trust somebody who denies that reality? If I was black, I would be willing to hear your ideas unless you told me there wasn't a racist element in your group. Until we point it out and say enough, racism is not welcome, anti-black isn't welcome, anti-Jewish isn't welcome, we're never going to win the argument. We have good ideas, but we cannot make bedfellows with racists. And one of the most prominent philosophies with young conservative people, it's called the New Right, is the Jewish question. What do we do with the Jews? What do we do with, it's an ancient question, goes back to the protocols of Zion, goes back to all the, what do we do with these Jews? There's this idea, this nefarious idea that they have controlled the world and are trying to destroy everything that isn't them. And there's this thing that's called, they call it the Jewish question, and their number one motivating factor is how to get rid of the Jews. I want you to keep this in mind. That's why, and what's interesting is where they have no agreement with anybody on the left, no agreement with any communist Marxists, they all of a sudden converge on this issue. Because as much as I just criticized conservatives, an element of the right, the entire left is now starting to call for the abolition of Israel. It's across the board. And I say that to say that America, which is beginning to change directions, if you think that our lack of support and our withdrawal is a good form of isolation, or I want to make something clear to you. Not only is the world against Israel, not only is America against Israel, and I know that formally we've been for Israel, but the only thing keeping Israel safe besides God himself and the Jewish people, the only thing that has prevented a full-scale conflict is evangelical Christians. That we are the thin line. We are the thin line between a world that hates Jews and the safety of Jews. Politicians are held in check because of our pro-Israel positions. They're held in check. And the second the church says, oh, we're done having this talk, replacement theology, Israel doesn't matter, we're the church, look at us, we have made bedfellows with Nazis. We have made bedfellows with Nazis. Play the video real quick. I want you to notice something. Do we have the video?
Welcome back. An 18-year-old man from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is in federal custody, charged with supporting ISIS and planning a suicide attack on churches. According to the Department of Justice, Alexander Mercurio shared his plans on social media with other people he thought were ISIS sympathizers. Andrew Zodro shares the evidence found to support the charges.
According to court documents from the FBI, Alexander Mercurio admitted to first finding ISIS ideology while schools were canceled during the pandemic. And just to put that in context, Mercurio is 18 as of right now, so he was a young teen then. Those same documents tell a scary tale of a Coeur d'Alene teen who says he once grew up following white supremacy ideology, but converted to Islam, conflicting with his religious Christian parents. In private messages to a man he thought was another terrorist sympathizer, but was actually a federal agent, Mercurio feared he wasn't doing enough for the Islamic cause, saying, quote, "I don't have the desire to do anything except jihad, a craving for mayhem and terror," as recently as 3 weeks ago. Lamenting that he was going to go through all of Ramadan without committing an act of violence, Mercurio allegedly devised a plan where he would walk to the nearest church, attack churchgoers with baton, use a knife to kill them, burn the church to the ground, and do the same until no churches were left in Coeur d'Alene. He also had plans to either kill or kidnap his father before the attack, primarily to obtain access to his weapons. At around 12:45 on Saturday, the FBI raided Mercurio's home, finding a metal pipe, an ISIS flag, handcuffs, a folding saw, 2 canisters of butane fuel, a machete, and more, all in his bedroom.
Andrew Zadro reporting. If convicted,
The reason that I showed you that is for a very specific reason. In that video, a guy who was raised in a Christian household, He was raised in a Christian household. His parents were Christian. They identified as Christian. He discovered what, as a young teen? White supremacist ideology. White supremacist ideology, which has a lot to do with Jews. The Jewish question, Jewish hatred. But did he maintain his white supremacy? He made an alliance. He became an Islamic terrorist. Now, what does white supremacy and Islamism have in common? What does it have in common? Hatred for Jews. The same spirit. You know, it's interesting, they hate Jews, but what they go to burn down? Churches. If you think that we're spared from this fight, if you think that this doesn't have anything to do with us, if you think that it's not coming on all sides, you're telling me that a Marxist right? Intersectional college students, white supremacists, and fundamentalist Muslims can have a common point of interest. They have a common pipeline, and that pipeline's what to do with Jews.
Right. Come on, Brad.
And we're surrounded by possibilities of thousands of, we think that it's just I think this is one of the enemy's biggest plans because there's such reactionary talk about race in America. It's been handled so poorly and so negatively that I think you're going to see a generation of white men who grow up feeding on white supremacist ideology who convert to Islam. We've seen it over and over and over and over. And the thing is they'll make an unholy alliance with the left, and the only people that are standing in their way is us. The only people that are standing in their way is us. And why are they doing this? Why do they want to do this? They want to do this to make God a liar. They want to do this. Do you know what a spokesperson for Hamas said that the cause of the October 7th attacks were? Because the Temple Institute brought to Israel the red heifer. Now, to make this clear, they have to sacrifice a red cow. Jews are not allowed by orthodoxy to go to the Temple Mount right now because they'd be declared unclean. It's a sin. But if they sacrifice a red heifer, they can purify the grounds, and they can begin to rebuild the temple. They can rebuild. And a spokesperson for Hamas said that this was the reason that they attacked them. Now, I'm going to summarize all this quick. Hamas on October 7th, and I'll tell you how tricky America is, how tricky and why we're responsible for some of this, and how much it matters what your leaders do. Under the previous administration, Iran was down to 1 billion barrels a day pumping out oil. Sanctions were working. We were crippling their ability to purchase oil. Nobody could buy for them, so they did not have money. They began to beg for aid. Under the next administration, or the one that we have now, he kept the sanctions but did not enforce them. They went up to 3 billion barrels a day. 3 billion barrels a day. They began to get an influx of cash. Not only that, but in exchange for hostages that they held for us, we released $6 billion one day and $10 billion another day. We allowed $16 billion to go to Iran. Do you know what they did with that money? What they did with that money is they transferred it to Hamas, transferred it to Hezbollah, and I know that this is a lot, but Hamas attacked Israel, but what we don't talk about is that Hezbollah in the north of Israel has started launching rockets to the north of Israel, and do you know how many Israelis have lost their homes? 100,000. 100,000 Israelis have lost their homes and had to be evacuated out of northern Israel. Iran is funding both of those organizations with money that the U.S. could have stopped. Not only that, we took the Houthis off the terrorist watch list, stopped bombing Yemen. And so we've tried to do this to appease Iran. And when you appease Iran, you're appeasing a devil that wants nothing to do but destroy the state of Israel. Now, I want to tell you what's next. I want to tell you what's next, and I'm done. The previous administration set up a precedent when they killed a man named Qasem Soleimani. It was one of the greatest decisions a president has ever made, in my opinion, even though the international community made an absolute outrage about it. What happened is Iran, it's called proxy wars. Nations don't fight directly. They fund terrorists. They do things. Iran has fueled a lot of terrorists that have killed American soldiers in Syria, Iraq, and here they bombed directly. Iran was testing the waters under the previous administration, and they launched missiles at a site, and an American contractor was killed. It was an Iraqi Air Force base, and then one American contractor was killed. So the military went before President Trump, who was the president at the time, and they gave him an array of options. And they say, here's your options. We can launch back at facilities and kill about 25 of their workers or do things. Or the strongest option, one that no president would ever take, is we can kill their top general. Their number one general. The guy that for decades has been planning terrorism against the U.S. And they said, if you do this, this would be a start. This is like if somebody taps you in the shoulder, you punch him in the face. Like this was a strong setup. And he said, do that one. He said, kill the general. So we drone attacked and assassinated their general. And there was an outcry. They're like, oh, this isn't a violation of international law. But it set a precedent where Iran said, no. They tried to launch missiles back, and there was no deaths. There was about 111 concussions. And they were so upset, but there was a de-escalation, and we set a precedent. Now, the whole world, from China to Russia to everywhere, watched this. Because we were the most energy independent at that time, and because we were producing so much natural gas and oil that we became the #1 exporter of energy in that time, Russia's economy began to collapse. So they could not afford to invade Ukraine. I want you to think about this. And they saw what peace through strength looked like. They saw what happens when a man says, if you kill a single American, I'm going to kill your top general. That's what happened. So you're going to kill an American. And so there was peace. It's like if Minister Greg was here, it'd be foolish of me to go run and punch him in the chest. He can pick me up and just throw me through the wall. I wouldn't have a chance. And you know why? If I was a bad person, you know why I wouldn't go punch him in the chest? Not because I want peace, because I know he would beat me up. That's the only reason. And see, we had relative peace and stability because we knew. And so what happened is the person that replaced Qasem Soleimani, what happened is Iran funded Hezbollah, and they supplied 4,400 missiles launching to the north. They funded Hamas for the October 7th attack. Now, they have been fighting this proxy war since 1985. They've been, I'm making it quick so you understand. So Israel has been fighting Iran indirectly since 1985. Iran has been funding terrorists all around them through oil money. And any time that we cooperate with Iran, that oil money does go to attack Israel, 100% of the time. So they have $16 billion cash plus an export of 2 billion extra barrels of oil a day. They're getting money, and so what do? They fund this attack on Israel. Israel, instead of sitting back and doing nothing, they bomb the top general in Iran, one of the replacements for Qasem Soleimani. So they take a drone and they kill him, and this is what set up last night. This is what set up. Because the response was harsh, Iran, I need you to understand something. Iran, for the first time in history, directly entered conflict with Israel. Right. So they are no longer just sponsoring terrorists. They launch their missiles, and they'll deny funding Hezbollah at times and stuff, but we know they are. Let me tell you why. Shortly before Iran's missiles came in, Hezbollah launched over 100 missiles. They launched over 100 missiles at Israel with the effort of depleting Israel's defense. It's called the Iron Dome, so that should there be a chance a missile gets through, it would increase the probabilities of its hitting. But Israel's defense system, called the Sling of David, effectively stopped every single missile in Iran. It stopped not a single death. But here's where things get interesting, folks, prophetically. Here's where things get interesting. Things get interesting because Benjamin Netanyahu was in a plane called the Doomsday Plane, flying around, and they have their war plans. They effectively stopped every single missile. Because nobody was killed, there is now an effort for them not to respond. Now, I'm not going to make a judgment here. I'm just going to tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to be fine either way. Israel knows that Iran is developing nuclear weapons. Iran is in the process of developing nuclear weapons. There's no reason they need nuclear power. They're developing nuclear weapons. And quite frankly, Iran looks foolish when it comes to their military. They're not strong at all. The missile was a sideshow. Israel dominated their missile show. And if Iran and America and Israel got into a conflict, we would wipe them out like that. It's not even close. So if you're afraid of that, don't be afraid. We would completely decimate Iran. That's not the issue. The issue is that there's not a will to fight. And because there's not a will to fight, time is continuing. And what Iran is doing is developing nuclear weapons. Let me tell you something. We would whip Russia in a battle army to army. We would destroy Russia. Russia can't even take the Ukraine without suffering severe losses. The reason that Russia keeps us at bay, the reason that is because they have nuclear weapons. They can detonate nuclear weapons within the U.S. I say all this to say this. Even though nobody died, Israel is in a position where they're going to press to attack Iran. But the administration came out and said, we will not support you. Now, I want you to think about this because I'm looking 20 years down the road. Iran will develop a nuclear bomb. The question is not whether we go to war with them now, it's whether we go to war with them now or then. The worst case scenario is the one that I fear is happening. America is stepping back. America is stepping, and let me tell you something. It's on both sides. I don't think that just because somebody's a Republican, they're going to support Israel. If you think that that's the case, because there are so many right-wing people who are anti-Jewish and think that we should have nothing to do with them, don't understand them, they bought into the lies, and they spit the same thing that you hear from Marxists. They spit the same exact stuff. And so there's pressure on both sides, which is why you see America receding. Now, I want you to understand that America, whether you like us or not, has been that barrier between peace and chaos. And when Israel feels they are alone, they're going to have their back in a corner. They're not going to know what to do. But worse than that, when Iran develops nuclear weapons, the Iron Dome ain't stopping it. Iran has stated their intent to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. They are working for the devil. Literally, the reason they said they attacked is to prevent the temple from being restored. What happens when the temple's restored? Let me make this just clear real quick. What happens when the temple's restored? Any Christian that thinks that they need to go worship at a temple is mistaken. We are the temple. If you want to know where God lives, look at us. Look at us. But my mom and I were talking, and there's an interesting scenario. If the temple was the place where God resided, if it was the place where God resided, and it's the same spirit that's in us. It's the same spirit in us, right? That means that the Holy Spirit, and that's what we believe. It was the same spirit that was in us. That was God's residence, and now it exists within us. That's the point of the whole book of Hebrews. If we take some eschatology into consideration, and imagine a world in which a rapture type event does happen. So I don't think that we'll be called up into the sky. I don't think that we'll disappear. This is one of the biggest mistakes about the rapture. I think it'll be a mass death. I think overnight 2.3 billion people will die. Essentially, their souls will leave their bodies, will be called up into heaven, okay? Now, why do I think that? Because if people just disappeared, their bodies just disappeared into the sky, everybody would know what that was right away. Everyone would point to that and say, we heard of that. But if 2.3 billion people died suddenly, they would say there must be some kind of epidemic. It wouldn't lead to a pointing towards Christianity. It would lead to more centralized control. We have to figure this out. What's going on? Now, if every Christian on earth dies, so does the presence of God. It goes up with them. The presence of God doesn't stay in their corpses. So where would that leave the presence of God? The only witness left would be in the temple. The only witness of God left would be in the temple. If God honored and said, my presence shall return here, that this would be the place. And this is how the Jews would become the witnesses to the world. This is how the Jews would become the witnesses to the world. And so I'm not saying that we should just defend things to bring the end of times, but I'm saying this, that Romans 11 makes clear that God is not done with the Jewish people when it comes to his plan in life. Satan can read that scripture as much as us, so he'll do everything in his power to cut them off, just like he'll cut off your prophetic promise. He wants to do everything to cut them off, to make God a liar. He wants to eliminate that people, which is why the whole world is filled with hatred. People who should look radically different, act radically different, talk radically different. It's filled with hatred against one group of people because Satan believes that if he can cut them off and if he can deny their existence and he can make God a liar, then the world cannot be saved in the end of things. It cannot be redeemed. But God is going to overtake that plan. And so the reason that we're so pro-Israel in this sense, God's going to do whatever he wants to do. But being for Israel, is a prophetic mindset to where you can see the plans of God as they're unfolding. And you understand scripture in such a way that you're going to stand next to God's plans and not against God's plans. So I don't want war. I hate war, but I assure you, I will always stand with God's people. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I don't think the state of Israel as we know it will exist forever. I don't think the Star of David is Israel's final symbol. I believe that the Lion of Judah should be Israel's final symbol. I believe the Lion of Judah. The Star of David is a Kabbalistic symbol. It's not the right symbol. It should be the Lion of Judah. And I believe when we see the Lion of Judah rise up on Israel's flag, that'll be the final state of Israel. But here's the thing, is we have to stand by the plan and the promise of God. And so there's an interesting situation happening in America, both in the heart of America towards Israel, but also in the politics of America. If we recede, we are not ensuring peace. If we recede, we're ensuring chaos. And I want you to remember this. If it looks like there's peace, and that peace is through weakness, that peace is through allowing Iran to know that they can attack Israel directly and get away with it. If that peace is because Americans do not care about the Jewish people and the promise of Israel, if that peace is for that reason, then America's days are numbered. I want you to read your Bible today and tell me where the United States of America is in it. Where it says that. I want you to read that and tell me where it's at. It's not there. There's one nation that's promised. That nation is Israel. And I love this country. I love this country, but there's only one nation that's promised. And every nation's alignment for or against that nation, with the understanding that their God is the true and living God, will determine the outcome of every other nation. And so America's at a moment, the church is at a moment, individual Christians are at a moment. You can't escape what's happening around you. You can't escape it, and you have a choice to make. That's choices in your prayer life, that choices in how you talk to others, that choice is whether you buy the lie, and there will be a lot of pressures to buy the lie. There will be a lot of pressures. They're going to make Israel look like, actually a fashion model in Europe did this. Think about this. She posted the flag of Israel next to the Nazi flag and said they're the same thing. They're accusing them of genocide. They say that Israel has intentionally killed 33,000 civilians. Those numbers come from Hamas. We've killed 13,000 soldiers, and 18,000 civilians have died in urban warfare because they build tunnels under their own buildings. They use humans as shields. It's an ugly, bloody mess of urban warfare, but people believe it. They believe the lie. This is the quickest time a resolution to declare genocide has ever been brought up before the International Criminal Court. The quickest time. The countries are desperate to see Israel fail. And you have to ask yourself, why is there such a driving hatred towards this group of people? Why is it, and I'm done here, why is there such a driving hatred? Is it really because Jews are some nefarious group of people who control the world and want your kids to be genetically engineered homosexuals? Is that really what, because that's what, is it really that all Jews are communist Marxists? Is it really a Jewish question? Or could it be that the God of this world sees that there is a plan that has to be fulfilled through them? And if he can get the whole world to act like a Herod, if he can convince the whole world to act like Pharaoh, maybe yet again he can squash the plan this time. The only mechanism he has is death, chaos, and lies. Do not believe the lie. People will criticize us. They will threaten us. They will call us Zionist scum. People will accuse me of being paid by the Jewish state of Israel. People are going to call me online a secret Jew. That's what they're going to call me. They're going to say, look at his tzitzit. He's probably a Jew. Test his bloodline. They're going to say all of these things about you. They're going to come up with crazy things if you defend Israel. They're going to say that. But you in your heart need to know that you are on the right side of this discussion because you are on the right side of God. It does not mean that everything Israel does is right. They do a lot wrong. Does not mean they do everything right. But it means fundamentally you can see the spirit that is behind the lies. You can see that the same spirit, and it's not just a spirit against Jews. We are Jews, folks. Jesus made you Jewish. You were worshiping pagan gods before. My Anglo-Saxon heritage was worshiping white gods. George's West African heritage was worshiping their gods. But because of Jesus, we worship the true and living God. He has made us all a people of Israel. And so I don't understand when Christians say they're not Jews. You're as Jewish as the next Jewish person around you. You don't murder. You don't murder because you know it's wrong not to murder. You don't steal because you inherited this Jewish God's idea of not to do things. Your life is constructed as a Jew. And if you turn against them, you turn against the true and living God and your own people. And I promise you, you will be prophetically protected and in the right if you know where you're at, because this world is rising up. And I don't know if it's going to be an end times thing or we're going to go into an era of peace, but I need you to know where this church stands. I'm not going to leave it at the doorstep. I'm not going to say it doesn't belong in the church. I'm not going to pretend like we can't talk about it, because this is everything. And I ask you all to join with me in praying. And I'll say this regarding demographics, and I ask you, the influence of the Nation of Islam and a lot of ideology on the left, we know, it's no secret, we don't have to pretend about demographics, that the majority of Black Americans identify with the left. And along that, they also tend to identify with Palestine because the narratives of oppression. I'm asking you to be an influence for good in your community. I'm asking you to have those conversations, have real conversations. I'm asking you to explore the theology of Israel for yourself and bring it up with your families. I'm asking you to have those difficult conversations, and so that we can correct this. And on the white side, I know most of the white people who are evangelicals tend to be conservatives. Even if you're pro-Israel, you can't be pro-Israel and anti-Black. Right? But no, hear me. I know we can't be pro-Israel, half of us, and then not deal with anti-Jewish, anti-Black, or any racist rhetoric and ideas when it comes up. Let me make something clear. The dream of integration is a wonderful dream, and we have to press forward in it. And there's been backward steps to try to segregate our society along tribal lines, that try to separate us along tribal lines. And one of the things that is most shameful about conservatives is and I am one now, I wasn't always, but I can see both sides, is that we have ignored the skeletons in our closet in order for short-term political power. And Black people don't trust us. They don't trust us. They don't trust us because we're not honest about race. They don't trust us because we're reactionary when it comes to a police shooting. They don't trust us. We're not even willing to have the conversation. And if they don't trust us about that, and they can't have a conversation, why would they trust us when it comes to any other issue? There shouldn't be a coalition of hatred against Jews that unites the races. There should be a coalition of pro-Israel that unites the races. Every race should come together. The church should come together and understand what God is doing in the earth. And so I'm talking to conservative white Christians. It is time to stop pretending like we don't have a race problem in church. It's time to stop pretending like we don't have a race problem in our families. It's time to stop pretending like that element is not there. It's there, and it needs to be brought out into the light, exposed, and dealt with.